1 month ago, the Earth suddenly changed its elliptical orbit, and in doing so began to follow a path which gradually, moment by moment, day by day, took it closer to the sun. And all of man's little devices to stir up the air are no longer luxuries. They happen to be pitiful and panicky keys to survival. The time is 5 minutes to 12, midnight. There is no more darkness. The place is New York City, and this is the eve of the end. Because even at midnight, it's high noon, the hottest day in history, and you're about to spend it in the Twilight Zone.
Rod Serling is one of the most celebrated storytellers in television history, the creator behind The Twilight Zone, a series so enduring it gave popular culture a phrase we still reach for when something feels just a little too strange to explain. The show ran on CBS from 1959 to 64, won Emmy and Hugo Awards, and permanently altered what people expected from TV drama. But behind every episode was a secret Serling kept hidden in plain sight, one he even denied outright when journalists pressed him on it. The whole show was an act of creative rebellion, a carefully constructed disguise that let him say things about race, prejudice, and human cruelty that American television flatly refused to let him say any other way. The huge secret Rod Serling kept while making The Twilight Zone was that science fiction was never really the point. Before we get into it, drop a comment below and tell us, have you ever watched a Twilight Zone episode and caught the real social message hiding underneath the story? Which episode gave it away for you? A murder that changed everything.
I think black people's reaction was so visceral. Everybody knew we were under attack. And that attack was symbolized by the attack on a 14-year-old boy.
In August 1955, a 14-year-old black boy from Chicago named Emmett Till was abducted, beaten, and murdered while visiting family in Mississippi. The nation watched as an all-white jury acquitted both killers of all charges. Photographs from Till's open casket funeral, published in Jet magazine, circulated widely and became one of the defining flashpoints of the civil rights movement. Rod Serling, a 30-year-old writer on the rise during a golden age of American television drama, watched all of it unfold in the news. He believed deeply that his medium had a responsibility to confront injustice. He later said, quote, "The writer's role is to be a menacer of the public's conscience. He must have a position, a point of view." Soon after the trial, Serling felt compelled to write a teleplay addressing the racism behind Till's murder. He had recently enjoyed the biggest success of his career, and he believed the moment demanded something bold. What he ran into instead was a wall built by advertisers, network execs, and the cold economics of television profit. The experience would shake him, but rather than back away from television entirely, he would spend years trying to find a way through, and each attempt would bring him closer to the show he was ultimately destined to make. The Censorship Machine.
On Twilight Zone, for example, done during just as timorous a time as any other time, we made a comment on prejudice, on conformity, on intolerance, on censorship. But it's easy to do it when you're talking about Buck Rogers isn't allowed to write his memoirs in the way he wants to write them.
Yes.
So he puts on his backpack, his rocket pack, and he zooms over to the publisher. And they applaud and laugh and think how exciting and interesting. Now, it may well be that the inner message may never get through, but I think peripherally it does get through.
When Serling first pitched a story about the Till case to the advertising agency representing the U.S. Steel Hour on ABC, he was already softening the material. Aware he would have to make concessions, he framed the idea as a story about a Jewish pawnbroker's lynching in the South. It was greenlit. Meanwhile, he was separately working on a Broadway adaptation where he planned to tell the real story more directly, with a black victim at the center. But when he mentioned in an interview with Daily Variety that his script was based on the Till murder trial, papers across the country picked it up. White supremacist organizations sent thousands of letters and telegrams threatening both ABC and the Steel Hour. The network caved quickly. What followed was a systematic dismantling of nearly everything Serling had written. He later described the experience to journalist Mike Wallace as going over his script with a fine-tooth comb by 30 different people, with Serling forced to attend at least 2 meetings a day for over a week, taking notes as to what had to be changed. Journalist Jeff Kisseloff, author of An Oral History of Television, explained the logic plainly. Station owners and advertising agents were afraid to offend any segment of their white audiences, even racists, for fear of losing income. As television grew into a national medium during the 1950s, the relative openness of its early days was squeezed out in favor of selling to a white consumer market. Black purchasing power was simply not factored in. Nat King Cole captured the whole situation in one sharp sentence: Madison Avenue is afraid of the dark. Noon on Doomsday, a story gutted.
Case in point, I think a show I did for the Steel Hour some years ago, 3 years ago, called Noon on Doomsday, which was a story which purported to tell what was the aftermath of the alleged kidnapping in Mississippi of the Till boy, the young Chicago Negro. And I wrote the script using black and white initially. Then it was changed to suggest an unnamed foreigner. Then the locale was moved from the South to New England, and I'm convinced they'd have gone up to Alaska or the North Pole and using Eskimos as a possible minority, except I suppose the costume problem was of sufficient severity not to attempt it.
When Noon on Doomsday finally aired, April 25th, 1956, it bore almost no resemblance to what Serling had intended. Any trace of the South had been removed from the script. A Coca-Cola bottle could not appear in frame in case it reminded viewers of the region. The opening crawl placed the story in New England instead. The victim was no longer a black man. He was now depicted as an unnamed foreign stranger. Serling was also pushed to soften the portrayal of the killer. It was suggested, he fumed, that the killer in the case was not a psychopathic malcontent, but just a good, decent American boy momentarily gone wrong. When the New York Times reviewed the teleplay, Serling felt the full weight of what had been stripped away. He wrote to a friend, quote, "I felt like I got run over by a truck and then it backed up to finish the job." His relationship with the Theater Guild, which had been working on the stage adaptation, also broke down. The theatrical version was never performed or published during his lifetime. It's worth noting that some details around this ordeal may be slightly exaggerated or conflated. Rod Serling Memorial Foundation board member Nicholas Parisi has cautioned that a good deal of myth has crept into the narrative, with certain details Serling described possibly belonging to the Broadway draft rather than the teleplay. Even so, the core experience was real. The censorship was severe, and the result was a hollowed-out story that failed to land. A town has turned to dust.
You care to make a statement about what happened or anything?
Yeah, I'll make a statement. Those people better behave themselves because we've got lots more rope. He's just upset. He petered up something terrible.
Serling was not finished. He tried again, this time for CBS's Playhouse 90, with a story about a lynching in a small southwestern town. CBS executives pushed back once more, eventually forcing him to move the setting back 100 years, erase any direct reference to Till, and remove the racial dynamics from the script entirely. The resulting production, titled A Town Has Turned to Dust, still managed to carry Serling's intended message about prejudice and hatred, even if it communicated it more universally. Its closing monologue, delivered by a journalist signing off a telegram, already had the feel of what the Twilight Zone would become. It spoke plainly about the cost of hatred and the inability of people to live alongside one another. Scholar Lester H. Hunt has argued that what Serling learned from these two productions formed the creative philosophy that would define his landmark show. Serling had shifted, as Hunt described it, from an artist who believed in depicting social problems directly to one who worked through the broader principles of human nature. He was no longer chasing the specific headline, he was chasing something harder to argue against. Serling later put his new approach in plainly cynical terms. If you want to do a piece about prejudice against black people, you go instead with Mexicans and set it in 1890 instead of 1959. The tray that said everything.
We have what I think, at least theoretically anyway, because it hasn't really been put into practice yet, a good working relationship, where in questions of taste, in questions of the art form itself, in questions of drama, I'm the judge, because this is my medium and I understand it. I'm a dramatist for television. This is the area I know. I've been trained for it. I've worked for it for 12 years, and the sponsor knows his product, but he doesn't know mine. So when it comes to the commercials, I leave that up to him. When it comes to the story content, he leaves it up to me.
Has nothing been changed in the...
We changed in 18 scripts, Mike. We have had one line changed.
By the time The Twilight Zone premiered in 1959, Serling had mastered the art of concealment. He had also learned from his earlier run-in with the press. When Mike Wallace interviewed him on the eve of the show's premiere and accused him of abandoning socially important writing, Serling calmly agreed. If by important you mean I'm not going to try to delve into current social problems dramatically, you're quite right, I'm not, he said. It was, of course, the opposite of the truth. But even within the show's run, the commercial pressures he had navigated during the Till years never fully disappeared. A small but telling example came during the production of Judgment Night, the 10th episode of the first season. The show was sponsored by General Foods, which ran coffee ads during broadcasts. A scene called for a British ship's captain, played by Patrick Macnee, to order a tea service on the bridge, a perfectly natural choice for the character. CBS censors pushed back, wanting the captain to order coffee instead, out of deference to the sponsor. Serling looked at it practically. He was not being asked to undercut a moral argument or rewrite a story. It was a single line of dialogue. So he found a middle path. Instead of ordering tea or coffee, the captain would simply call down for a tray, leaving the beverage entirely to the viewer's imagination. Studio censors were satisfied, and the sponsor was satisfied, and Serling got to walk away without having actually given an inch. It was a small maneuver, but it was completely in character. Concede the surface, protect the substance. A tray instead of tea was, in his own minor way, the same trick he had been running for years, slipping the real message past the people who would have killed it if they had seen it clearly. Now it's time to hear from you. The Twilight Zone was built on hidden messages and disguised truths. If you've watched an episode and had that moment where the real meaning suddenly clicked, tell us in the comments below which episode it was.